In 1997, America's 10th National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski published his book, The Grand Chessboard, American Primacy and its Geostrategic Imperatives. In this book, Zbigniew Brzezinski celebrated the disintegration of Soviet Russia and claimed that the United States of America would be the key player in the Eurasian affairs. Almost 25 years later, in 2021, United States of America has been kicked out of Eurasia. This is a huge moment in the fast evolving geopolitical landscape. Geopolitical world order is surely changing as Anglo-American Western Empire is on a steady decline. Therefore, it becomes extremely important to analyze Narendra Modi-led BJP's foreign policy at this hour. When we analyze Narendra Modi-led BJP government's foreign policy, we find that it is a total failure as it fails to understand the very dynamic nature of the world order. Kindly watch this episode till the very end in order to get an alternative perspective.
US National Security Advisor Brzezinski flew to Pakistan to set about rallying resistance. He wanted to arm the Mujahideen without revealing America's role. On the Afghan border near the Khyber Pass, he urged the soldiers of God to redouble their efforts.
We know of their deep belief in God, and we are confident that their struggle will succeed. That land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
The purpose of coordinating with the Pakistanis will be to make the Soviets bleed for as much and as long.
The video clip that you have just now watched perhaps provides enough clue. America's 10th National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski was seen brainwashing rather simple Afghan tribal men along Afghanistan-Pakistan border near Khyber Pass. And all this in 1979, the year Soviet invasion of Afghanistan started. It was the American national security apparatus represented by America's 10th National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski who brainwashed the simple Afghan tribal men and pushed these people into a never-ending war which continues till this very day. And all this was justified under the pretext that these were Mujahideens who were fighting the Soviet Russian invaders. This is again a big lie. Groundwork started almost 8 years back, that is in 1971. Taliban and later Al-Qaeda originated from this backdrop. The bloody civil war that Afghanistan witnessed in the 1990s was the eventual fallout that completely ruined Afghanistan. It is the American administration which funded, trained and raised these Mujahideens who later turned into Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Till this day, American FBI, that is Federal Bureau of Investigation, haven't indicted Al-Qaeda or for that matter Osama bin Laden for the destruction of World Trade Center. But even then, if we consider Taliban and Al-Qaeda as terrorist organizations, then we'll have to admit that the American administration and more specifically American national security apparatus should be credited with the title Father of Terrorism. Zbigniew Brzezinski, a Jewish refugee of Polish origin who later became 10th National Security Advisor of the United States of America, should be credited with this title of Father of Terrorism. And if Zbigniew Brzezinski happens to be the father of terrorism, then his mentor, that is Zbigniew Brzezinski's mentor, Henry Kissinger, the 8th National Security Advisor of the United States of America, should be credited with the title Grandfather of Terrorism. By 1971, Anglo-American power axis had received body blows. In Vietnam War, more than 2 million Vietnamese lost their lives and countless number of people were displaced and maimed. But Anglo-American forces lost close to 58,000 men. American economy got crippled in this process. In United States of America, public opinion grew against this irrational war in Vietnam. Many Americans till this day believe that the Jewish German refugee turned America's 8th national security advisor under Nixon administration, Henry Kissinger, and his clique was primarily responsible for this carnage. In 1971, India's victory over Pakistan and freedom of Bangladesh was a disaster for the Anglo-American axis and was looked upon as the victory of Indo-Russo power axis. American economy was on the verge of bankruptcy. President Richard Nixon had to take American dollar completely out of the gold standard, and this is the beginning of fiat currency or petrodollar. In order to avenge these body blows, American administration came up with a sinister plan. This master plan would be formulated by America's national security apparatus under the leadership of Henry Kissinger, a Jewish German refugee turned America's 8th national security advisor. Kissinger and his disciple Zbigniew Brzezinski, America's 10th national security advisor, are chiefly responsible for this quagmire in which Afghanistan finds itself today. Kissinger and later Brzezinski laid the foundation of America's foreign policy. Their policies are chiefly responsible for the death and destruction which Afghanistan has been witnessing for the last 40 years. Naturally, question comes, what was the sinister plan? Anglo-American Western Empire zeroed in on Afghanistan for its geostrategic significance. They understood that if they could control Afghanistan, they would be able to disturb peace in India through Pakistan-sponsored terrorism, keep Iran at its toes, and more importantly, they would be able to get a foothold in Eurasia and Central Asia. In Asia-Eurasian region, their main aim was to destabilize India through terrorism in one hand and destabilize Muslim-dominated states of former Soviet Russia such as Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan on the other hand. So, the Anglo-American Empire mobilized their intelligence assets. In 1973, the king of Afghanistan, Muhammad Zahid Shah, was removed in a coup. They soon started radicalizing the Afghan society, particularly in the tribal belt along Afghanistan-Pakistan border near Khyber Pass. And in 1977, American intelligence helped an American stooge called Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq to become Pakistan's president. Zia used Pakistan's crushing defeat in 1971 war against India and the sentiment of the Pakistani people to prepare a ground for the radicalization of Pakistani society. Zia wasted no time in providing the Americans the much needed foothold in the Pakistan, and Pakistan became a de facto US base for waging a proxy war against Soviets in one hand and India on the other hand. Zia would appoint a Pakistani army general called Hamid Gul and would mobilize Pakistan's military and ISI, that is inter-services intelligence, to support the US Taliban axis. Radicalization of Afghan society would continue throughout the latter part of 1970s, which picked up pace after General Zia became Pakistan's president. It is this which forced the Soviet Russia to start a military campaign against Afghanistan, which proved to be suicidal. USA spreads a big lie that their support to the Mujahideens and Taliban was in response to Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. But in reality, it is the other way around. Soviet invasion was aimed to throttle United States of America and Pakistani activities in Afghanistan and to prevent their backyard from turning into a heaven for the terrorist activities. Naturally, question comes, what was the impact of this proxy war? Soviet Russia got economically crippled and as a result, it got disintegrated. Pakistan channelized American and Western funds, arms, ammunition and equipments, training and intelligence against India in anti-Indian terrorism and proxy war against India. From the onset, USSR and India was the main target of Western powers such as USA and Britain. They just used Afghanistan and to a great extent Pakistan for this purpose. Afghanistan got completely destroyed in this process. Through the never-ending saga of terror strikes in India, socio-political subversion of India was achieved, which culminated in the socio-religious polarization in India as a cross-section of Hindu community started to associate terrorism with Islam. Since USA and Britain armed Pakistan with nuclear weapons, it prevented Congress governments to fight a full-scale war with Pakistan. Congress governments adopted a covert approach rather than overt means, and since covert operations are supposed to be kept secret, people in India, particularly a section of Hindus, thought that the successive Congress governments were soft on terror. Covert operations or special operations are supposed to be kept secret. If someone starts to trumpet about these things, people should understand that these are probably aimed to create a narrative among the domestic audience, such as Balakot. However, since covert operations are mostly invisible from the public spectrum, majority population acted with emotion rather than rational. This actually induced a psychological aberration among the masses as the masses started to think that the successive Congress governments were soft on terror. It is this cognitive dissonance coupled with RSS-backed socio-political and religious subversion throughout 90s which culminated in the emergence of BJP as a political power. Therefore, an enlightened viewer might raise an important question: did United States of America Pakistan activities and Pakistan-sponsored terrorism help RSS-BJP combination to emerge as a political power through socio-political and religious subversion? Well, viewers can draw their own conclusion. However, it seems as if, or it appears as if, that the Pakistan-sponsored terrorism helped BJP-RSS combination to climb up the political power axis in India. Once Bajpayee and BJP-led NDA government came to power in 1998, they wasted no time in appointing Brajesh Mishra as India's first national security advisor. This national security advisor essentially is an American concept that was drafted into the Indian governmental framework for the first time. Although NSA Brajesh Mishra and his office could not prevent Kargil War 1999, IC-814 hijack 1999, Chitti Singhpura massacre year 2000, Parliament attack year 2001, Kaluchak massacre year 2002, it could not diminish the significance of NSS office. Rather, NSS office grew in power and stature. In fact, IC-814 hijack culminated in the release of Masood Azhar along with his accomplices who were in captivity in Indian jail. Present NSA James Bond Mr. Ajit Doval actually negotiated the release of Masood Azhar and two other accomplices, and then NSA National Security Advisor Brajesh Mishra persuaded Bajpayee and BJP-led NDA government to release these people from Indian jails. Masood Azhar went on to form Jaish-e-Mohammed, a Pakistan-based terror outfit that was responsible for Parliament attack year 2001, Kaluchak massacre year 2002, 26/11 Mumbai attack in 2008, alongside of course Lashkar-e-Taiba, and finally Pulwama attack 2019, which changed the course of 2019 general election in India. Bajpayee government started to alter India's foreign policy framework in between 1998 and 2004, and we saw a more pro-Israel, pro-American approach being adopted in the Indian foreign policy. And this shift in the Indian foreign policy was largely influenced by NSA Brajesh Mishra. Finally came the event 9/11, that is the destruction of World Trade Center in USA. Enlightened viewers might want to know whether the destruction of World Trade Center was an orchestrated event enacted through controlled demolition, funding and raising of terror outfits such as Al-Qaeda and Islamic State by the American administration before and after the event raises suspicion. Destruction of World Trade Center can be viewed as the thesis stage of classic Hegelian dialectic which gave them the pretext to start a war on terror. Destruction of World Trade Center, orchestration of terror attacks or events all over the world, including 26/11 Mumbai attack, and finally the war on terror were aimed to serve several purposes. Number one, polarize the world into two blocks, that is the sympathizers of Islam and supporters of political Zionism, so that a global conflict could be orchestrated as envisioned by the ruling elites. This would have given the ruling elites the perfect opportunity to set in motion their diabolical plan. Destroy the oil-rich Muslim nations of the second and third world, kill their people, plunder their resources, and destroy these societies and transform these societies into the spawning ground for future terrorism. Prolong the life of petrodollar through the plunder of resources and by boosting the war economy. Finally, to bring in a totalitarian surveillance state as envisioned by the ruling elites. After the destruction of World Trade Center, Bajpayee and BJP-led NDA government wasted no time in accepting America's bogus war on terror narrative, completely disregarding the fact that the Pakistan-sponsored terrorism in reality was US-sponsored terrorism. USA just used Pakistan's shoulder to aim at India. Terror attacks all throughout 90s and major terror events during Bajpayee and BJP-led NDA government in between 1998 and 2004 and major terror attacks beyond 2004 such as 26/11 Mumbai attack is the sole reason behind the socio-political and socio-religious subversion in India which culminated in the socio-religious polarization in India. And this socio-religious subversion is the main reason behind BJP's rise as a political power in India. Many think that 26/11 Mumbai attack was enacted through the involvement of four entities: Western intelligence assets, Pakistani military intelligence complex, Pakistan-based terror outfits such as Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, and Indian deep state. Soon after this, 26/11 was dubbed as India's 9/11. Bajpayee-led BJP government during 1998 and 2004 and Narendra Modi-led BJP government since 2014 used this bogus American war on terror narrative to implement a pro-American, pro-Israel policy, particularly the foreign policy. Therefore, these major terror events rather served as stimuli in sustaining a fear psychosis or a delusion among the Indian masses, which culminated in a psychological aberration called cognitive dissonance. An enlightened viewer might want to know whether these events were orchestrated, what Henry Kissinger would refer to as psyops or psychological operation. Henry Kissinger once famously stated that it is not a matter of what is true that counts, but a matter of what is perceived to be true. What is perceived to be true. Naturally, question comes, is there a relationship between the deep state and NSA, that is National Security Advisor's Office or National Security Agency or National Security Council or National Security Apparatus in general? Is NSA or National Security Apparatus there to protect the interest of the deep state from within a governmental framework or something else? So, what is a deep state? Deep state essentially is a secret society whose aim is to undermine the statecraft, which intends to subvert a statecraft for its own selfish benefit or own selfish interest. Question is, has the National Security Advisor's Office become the representation of the deep state into the statecraft? And is it the National Security Agency or National Security Apparatus which manipulates the governmental policies so as to satisfy the demands of its Western deep state bosses? Is it the reason why we see a foreign policy shift? In 1997, Zbigniew Brzezinski published his book, The Grand Chessboard, American Primacy and its Geostrategic Imperatives. In this book, Brzezinski celebrates what he has done to the Eurasian region. He actually celebrates the disintegration of Soviet Russia in 1990s. He writes, America is now the only global superpower and Eurasia is globe's central arena. Hence, what happens to the distribution of power on the Eurasian continent will be of decisive importance to America's global primacy and America's historical legacy. He goes on to say, the most immediate task is to make certain that no state or combination of states gains the capacity to expel the United States from Eurasia or even to diminish significantly its decisive arbitration role. But that was in 1997 and this is 2021. As I have told you earlier that the American conspiracy in Eurasia started in 1970s and today, almost 50 years later, United States of America had to flee Eurasia, a massive geopolitical victory to a great country called Russia. It is a victory for a great politician called Vladimir Putin. Even China has acknowledged that this essentially is a strategic and geopolitical victory for Russia and Vladimir Putin. Soviet Russia did a lot of work in Afghanistan in between 1960s and 1970s. Tajik, Turkmen and Uzbek people who live in the northern frontiers of Afghanistan were part of Northern Alliance, which was supported by Russia during Afghan civil war, while Taliban was supported by USA-Pakistan axis. With help from Russians, Northern Alliance defended the Tajik, Uzbek and Turkmen people from Taliban during Afghan civil war. From the onset, Taliban was armed and aided by United States of America and Pakistan. We all know that Northern Alliance leader Ahmad Shah Massoud was assassinated in an American and Pakistani intelligence-led operation just prior to the destruction of World Trade Center, which many think was an orchestrated event. This was done so that the Americans could get a smooth ride in Afghanistan, particularly in the northern areas when they would invade Afghanistan in the aftermath of World Trade Center destruction, and that is the reason why many think that it was an orchestrated event. After 9/11, Americans wiped out the resistance against Taliban, destroyed anti-Taliban militia, killed warlords who opposed Taliban, and they also killed those Taliban factions who were not entirely in the control of Pakistani ISI, that is Inter-Services Intelligence. Americans in reality trained Taliban in the name of Afghan army. This is a fact. Poppy cultivation, opium production and precious mineral mining were two other missions of these American soldiers. Everybody knows that the Western intelligence, comprising of British and American intelligence, runs the drug cartel in the whole world. Till 2014 and particularly in between 2004 and 2014, Pakistani government ISI military complex and Taliban joined hands with Pakistan-based terror outfits and channelized arms, ammunition, military hardware and equipments, training and logistics in sponsoring anti-Indian terrorism. They were of course helped to a great extent by the Indian deep state. This is the main reason behind a large number of terror attacks against India, which culminated into socio-political and religious subversion and polarization in India, which actually helped RSS BJP to gain political power in India. Pakistan-sponsored terrorism essentially is US-sponsored terrorism and nothing else. And now that United States of America is leaving Afghanistan, they are not supposed to do so much of drama when they themselves have signed secret agreement with the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which is basically Taliban. You can see a snapshot of that agreement over here. I'll be sharing the link to that agreement in the description section. The main point is the point number 2 that guarantees enforcement mechanisms and announcement of a timeline for the withdrawal of all foreign forces from Afghanistan. Kindly note this. This agreement was signed by the Donald Trump administration in February 2020. Mike Pompeo, then Secretary of State, took a leading role in the signing of this agreement. Kindly note that this agreement was signed between the American administration and the Taliban, which is basically an American proxy and nothing else. Yes, Taliban essentially is an American proxy. Ashraf Ghani's caretaker government was not part of this agreement. And now that the Biden administration is enacting this troop withdrawal agreement, they have gifted away $30 billion worth of arms, ammunition and equipments, which includes more than 200 air assets, including 4 C-130 transport aircraft, 23 Brazilian-made A-29 Super Tucano turboprop ground attack aircraft, 45 UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters, 50 smaller MD-530 choppers, 30 military-grade Cessna single-engine fixed-wing aircraft, more than 600,000 M16 assault rifles and M4 carbines, more than 6,000 machine guns, close to 75,000 vehicles, including 22,000 US Humvees, 160,000 pieces of communication equipment, 16,000 pieces of night vision goggles, Scan Eagle military drones for intelligence gathering. In between 2002 and 2017, United States of America equipped and armed Taliban in the name of equipping Afghan army by spending estimated 28 billion US dollar in weaponry alone. Apart from that, United States of America has left behind a large sum of US currency notes. Altogether, United States of America has spent close to 85 billion US dollar in training, arming, equipping and providing Taliban in the guise of training, arming, equipping and providing Afghan National Army. This is a fact. Let me tell you that once more, that Taliban essentially is an American proxy in the Eurasian region. The Russians have had unflinching support for Northern Alliance over the years, during Afghan civil war and during American occupation. Russia as well as China view Taliban as an American proxy and nothing else. US troop withdrawal from Afghanistan starting May 2021 and rapid Taliban advancement has made the situation precarious in Afghanistan. In an attempt to resolve the crisis, Russia has come up with a framework called Extended Troika. Russia has also invited China, Pakistan and United States of America. However, India has not been invited, which is quite natural. Under this framework, 3 rounds of talks have already taken place in Qatar amid fast evolving political and security situation in Afghanistan. 3 rounds of talks were held on March 18th, April 30th and August 11, 2021 respectively. Taliban essentially is an American proxy in Eurasian region. Since Russia sees Taliban as an American proxy, Russia will now strengthen Northern Alliance comprising of Tajik, Uzbek, Hazar and Turkmen factions. Successive Congress governments kept supporting Northern Alliance while Pakistan-US axis supported Taliban. Now onwards, you would see a more assertive and aggressive Northern Alliance. Let me tell you that this pro-American foreign policy essentially is a pro-Pakistan foreign policy, pro-Taliban foreign policy and pro-terrorism foreign policy and nothing else. Because it is the United States of America which can be considered as the mother of terrorism and nothing else. After doing plenty of Kemcho Trump and Howdy Modi since 2014 and after sidelining and undermining trusted allies like Russia and Iran, Modi-led BJP government have lost out on a golden opportunity to have a say in the restructure and rebuilding process of Afghanistan through Russia, Iran and Northern Alliance. Even a visit by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar to Russia just prior to the announcement of this extended Troika meeting did not yield any result. However, during Nehruji's time, India had good relations with Afghanistan and the Troika of Soviet Russia, Afghanistan and India kept Anglo-American power axis at bay for more than 2 decades. USA now wants to focus in the Asia-Pacific region and Indian Ocean region. It is not possible for United States of America to be at both the places. And they want to keep a vigil over Afghanistan through their proxy called Taliban. USA wants to create a Syria-like situation in Afghanistan through its proxy called Taliban so that they can again come back after sorting out Asia-Pacific and Indian Ocean region, which would take 5-6 years. And this is the reason why United States of America has actually gifted away so much of high-tech arms, ammunitions, equipments to Taliban, which is its proxy. This is something which has been noted by Russia as well as China, hence predominantly Tajik Northern Alliance would be strengthened. Afghanistan is a treasure trove of rare earth minerals, particularly lithium and gold, worth of $3 trillion US. China wants to join Afghanistan to CPEC just for this reason. Pakistani ISI, that is Indo-Services Intelligence, essentially is the handler for Taliban. Pakistan, through Taliban, retains the ability to become an impediment towards Chinese economic interests in Afghanistan. China and even Russia would need Pakistan to maneuver Taliban. Iran can use Shiite Hazar militia to safeguard its interest in northwest Afghanistan, but India is out of it. Although India does have an airbase in Tajikistan, India would find it difficult to maneuver with this pro-American policy as Tajiks would be under Russian influence. There is also a huge possibility that Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and even Turkmenistan joining back to the Russian Federation. This would take time, but this is a real possibility. From ancient times, Afghanistan had close ties with India in terms of religion and culture. Before the advent of Islam, Afghanistan was a majority Buddhist country. For a long time, RSS BJP have been feeding us with this pill, you know, Babaji ki booty, that one day they would again build Akhand Bharat. But today, we are nowhere in picture in the restructure and rebuilding process in the Afghanistan. There are semi-literate, delusional, brainwashed people in India who do not understand the fact that the world order is changing and changing pretty fast. Anglo-American Western establishment is going down and Eurasia is rising. Kindly watch this video clip. Chris Hedges is an eminent journalist.
The American empire is coming to an end. The U.S. economy is being drained by wars in the Middle East and vast military expansion across the globe. It is burdened by growing deficits, along with the devastating effects of deindustrialization and global trade agreements. Our democracy has been captured and destroyed by corporations that steadily demand more tax cuts, more deregulation, and impunity from prosecution for massive acts of financial fraud, all the while looting trillions from the U.S. Treasury in the form of bailouts. The nation has lost the power and respect needed to induce allies in Europe, Latin America, Asia, and Africa to do its bidding. Add to this the mounting destruction caused by climate change, and you have a recipe for an emerging dystopia. Overseeing this descent at the highest levels of the federal and state governments is a motley collection of imbeciles, con artists, thieves, opportunists, and warmongering generals. And yes, I am also speaking about the Democratic Party. The empire will limp along, steadily losing influence until the dollar is dropped as the world's reserve currency, plunging the United States into a crippling depression and instantly forcing a massive contraction of our military machine. Short of a sudden and widespread popular revolt, which does not seem likely, the death spiral appears unstoppable, meaning the United States as we know it will no longer exist within a decade, or at most two. The global vacuum we leave behind will be filled by China, already establishing itself as an economic and military juggernaut. Or perhaps there will be a multipolar world carved up among Russia, China, India, Brazil, Turkey, South Africa, and a few other states. Or maybe the void will be filled, as the historian Alfred McCoy writes, by a collection of transnational corporations, multilateral military forces like NATO, and an international financial leadership self-selected at Davos and Bilderberg that will forge a supranational nexus to supersede any nation or empire.
In 2010, Zbigniew Brzezinski saw a global political awakening and felt that the American hegemony would soon come to a grinding halt. We have also learned that the void could be filled by a multipolar world comprising of Russia, China, India, Brazil, and South Africa. Till 2014, India was well poised to become a major player in this multilateral world order. In 2011, George Soros-funded anti-corruption movements such as India Against Corruption movement, or for that matter, Bharat Swabhiman movement, were aimed to instate pro-American government in India so that India's progress could be halted. Enlightened viewers might say that the rise of Jacob Zuma in South Africa, Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, and Narendra Modi-led BJP in India are part of a Western conspiracy to prevent these countries from rising and filling that void due to the eventual but certain collapse of the American empire. Enlightened viewers might also say, going by the same logic, that BJP and Aam Aadmi Party are basically the opposite sides of the same coin, as both parties were actually benefited immensely from this anti-corruption movement which was funded by George Soros. If that is the case, then pro-American foreign policy of puppet Modi Sarkar is a logical extension of that. In reality, United States of America wants to prolong the tenure of Modi Sarkar, which would become an impediment towards India's rise. One of the reasons behind America's well-planned yet botched up withdrawal is aimed towards that. United States of America has left behind huge cache of arms, ammunition, equipments and hard cash in order to strengthen Taliban so that it orchestrates into violence and radicalization in Southeast Asia. This would allow Modi-led BJP to use this as a pretext to further radicalize and further polarize the Indian society, which United States of America thinks would become a perfect narrative towards BJP's vote bank politics. United States of America thinks that this is the only way in which Narendra Modi-led BJP's tenure can be prolonged. In reality, United States of America wants a civil war and Syria-like scenario in India so that British-American forces can come here in the guise of peacekeeping force. This is the way they want to enslave India, and this is their long-term plan. Therefore, my dear Indians, kindly wake up to this fact, understand this truth, kindly share this video with your loved ones and subscribe to this channel. Be very careful about this.